all of you to the Fashion and Philanthropy Speaker Series for Fashion Law and Diversity. I am Juanita Ingram. I'm one of the co-founders of Dress for Success Greater London and the chairman of trustees. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. As many of you already know, Dress for Success is a charity that helps unemployed women get back into the workplace by giving them interview attire and interview training. And I'm really excited and proud of the fact that we impact sustainability in the fashion world. In that, what we do is very green. We use recycled, donated, end-of-the-line clothing to help women get back into the workplace. So this not only has a wonderful effect on sustainability and the green initiative in the fashion lane, but it also helps to increase the diverse and inclusive workplace in London and all across the world. So we're really excited to have you here with us tonight to talk about fashion law, sustainability, supply chain, and so many other wonderful topics, as well as diversity and inclusion. So we will have two panels tonight. The first panel will be our fashion panel. We'll have a 30-minute dialogue, moderated dialogue, and we'll leave time for Q&A, and then we'll rotate. And we'll have our diversity and inclusion panel come up and do the same thing. We'll leave a little bit of time at the end for networking. We have some wine out here and some canapes. So we hope that you enjoy the dialogue, and we'll get started right away. If my fashion panelists can come up, please. I have been practicing for 16 years. I'm a lawyer in the U.S., and I primarily focus on supply chain in manufacturing. So whether it's the production of clothing or widgets, I think this is a very important topic. That's my background. I want to give each of you an opportunity to introduce yourselves. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Nichol. I'm an employment lawyer with Doug Clayton, who are a specialist workplace law firm. And for the last 15 of the 20 years that I've been practicing employment law, I've worked quite extensively with clients who run fashion businesses, usually at the luxury end of the sphere, and some more specialist brands. I also do a fair amount of work for individuals, and in that context, I suppose I see how things pan from both sides. I'm probably the last person to come and talk about diversity and inclusion and whether it's working within fashion. It's a bit like asking a surgeon what they think of the health of their patients. Usually people are coming to see me when the wheels are falling off and there are problems. So I have a sadly pretty negative view of things, and lots of war stories to share with regard to what happens with individuals. And particularly individual women who are trying to progress, trying to return from having babies, etc., etc. Slightly more positive when working with businesses themselves. We see a lot of work involving businesses quite rightly trying to protect their brand, protect their intellectual property, avoid ideas being stolen or shared inappropriately. So we're looking at things with a protective lens, I think. But whatever, it's not difficult to be passionate about what is a wonderful industry. It's absolutely at the heart of the London economy, and that we've all got, I think, judging by every person around the room, pretty aligned interests with.
Great. So I'm Joanna Davies. I was an investment banker for 8 years at JP Morgan in New York and London, and towards the end of that, I felt from a career standpoint I was ready to be more entrepreneurial and get back to my creative roots, which I always had, but sort of got lost with all the numbers and quantitative role that I had. And two, having dressed for the role for long hours, 12 to 16-hour days, you wake up for the first flight, you fly out, you show up, your suit's maybe a bit wrinkled, and then 12 hours later you're back on the flight at night and you're home. And on the plane on one of these last trips, I thought, why don't these clothes feel like yoga? Why aren't they more comfortable, but still looking tailored? Or like, I guess I was like, could I have changed into my yoga clothes or pajamas? But my male colleagues were sitting right there on the plane with me, so not really. Anyway, so that was the spark of the idea, like my eureka moment. Fast forward a few months, I took the time off. I did the leap of faith to leave the very cushy, secure job. Went to London College of Fashion, interned, as an unpaid intern for Amelia Wickstead, who I was a bridal client before, and sort of gathered the information I needed, or what I could, to launch a collection using performance sustainable fabrics that are 4-way stretch, breathable, machine washable, crease resistant, all of these things that you want as a woman who's high performing and trying to go places. And I launched that last year in July. So for me, having dived into fashion in this way, it hits you in the face very immediately that fashion is the number 2 biggest polluter on the planet after oil and energy. That says a lot. It's been propelled by fast fashion, just use of disposable fashion, and a lot of different sorts of elements going here that we're going to dive into tonight. But I wanted to create a brand that stood for making the right decision every step of the way, through our supply chain, our raw materials, through our packaging being recyclable and carbon neutral, through being able to support an organization like Dress for Success. And we can touch upon that a bit more later. But in every single decision along the way, I wanted it to be thoughtful and sustainable and environmentally friendly to the planet.
Hello, I'm Jenny Ison. Coming to speak to you here this evening is really quite special. My first visit to the Law Society was a little over 30 years ago. When I came for the admission ceremony, I became a solicitor, with 2 proud lawyer parents in tow. And I think they would have been quite shocked at that point to scroll forward 30 years and see that I've left the law, which I did a few years ago. And I've now become a fashion entrepreneur and created my own brand. So a lot of people were quite shocked by my decision. They saw me as a lawyer and didn't think I was going to change. But when I look back from this point, I can see a thread running through that led me to this point. You might not be able to tell because I'm sitting down, but I'm quite small. And petite women are very, very underprovided for. And it was really, I've always struggled to find clothes. And as a female lawyer, it was very important to me, and to, as I'm sure you all understand, to look good, to feel confident, and it was always a struggle. So after many years of grumbling, I thought, well, maybe instead of just grumbling about it, I should do something about it. And I also went to the London College of Fashion. I did a 4-day course. I didn't intern with Amelia Wickstead. Maybe I should have done. But I just did my research as a good lawyer, and 18 months ago, I set up my brand. And I've had, for a new brand, a lot of struggles. I didn't really know what a supply chain was. I now know. And that's why I think very interesting what we're going to be talking about this evening. But in only 18 months, the brand has become reasonably well known. We've been named by The Independent as one of the top petite brands. I've had coverage in quite a lot of the national press. But it is a continual struggle as a small brand. And I think one of the points I think tonight is when people are struggling or trying to improve their supply chain and to do things better, we shouldn't always be critical. Not everyone has the funds and the knowledge to set that very high standard. I think we should recognise more when people are trying and praise individual steps. So that's something I'd like to follow up with later on.
Yes. Sustainable fashion, what does that mean to you?
Yeah.
So workwear or professional office wear is a part of the entire realm of fashion that shouldn't be trend-led, shouldn't really be sort of this avant-garde, what are you wearing today, OOTD hashtag onto Instagram. Maybe it is for you.
Maybe.
So fashionable.
I've known.
No, but I think from a product design standpoint, we look to historical sort of classic silhouettes, the designs that have stood the test of time. So whether it's that beautiful waist-defined dress with an A-line skirt, it's a trouser, it's a blazer, it's a shirt. And so from that perspective, we look at the really core needs of what women need to wear to work, and then think how that can be impactful season after season. So from a life cycle perspective, we want to build garments that are high quality and built to last for a long time in your wardrobe. We look at then our supply chain and our raw materials. So our factories are all within the EU, as well as where we source our raw materials primarily from Italy, from environmentally responsible factories that invest in technology to reduce water and energy usage and sort of build that supply chain every step of the way and say no to the ones that don't meet our standards. We produce as we forecast as accurately as possible to what we think the demand will be, rather than approach a very large factory who wants 1,000 minimum per style, and then you're suddenly potentially stuck with dead stock or have to discount significantly because you don't have enough demand to meet that supply. We do pre-orders a lot on the site, so when a new collection launches and we see really good demand, we'll open it up for pre-order and sort of encourage our customers to wait and have that garment made for you, but it reduces wastage. Our packaging I mentioned and all of our shipments are carbon neutral. We use DHL Go Green and offset all the carbon on all of our shipments. And then I think the new step for us over the next year is to think about circular economy. So when you hear that term, and you're hearing it a lot more, and especially as it relates to fashion, is how can you have the life of the garment either go back to its original remain. So for example, denim could be a good example of this, where if you're no longer wearing it, you can recreate yarns out of the existing denim back into the yarns of a new garment and create a whole new garment out of that. And therefore you create a circle where there's energy spent on the creation of that, but you're not wasting the denim at the end of the day. That's one example, and I digress. But and then finally, we are a digitally native, direct-to-consumer e-commerce brand. So on every one of our shipments, there's a little flyer that says the positive cycle actions you can take from here. We talk about life cycle and how 75% of the energy of a garment happens in the after purchase part of the life. So do you really need to clean it? Does it have to be on high temperatures and a long wash? With a lot of our technical garments, you can use 30 degree and maybe half the time of what you normally spend on another garment that takes longer and higher energy. But on that slip too, was getting to the point. We include free returns in the UK and all our DHL return labels. We encourage our customers to donate something back from their closet that's gently worn that we would donate to Dress for Success. And then I think we'll touch on the consumer point, but customers have actually not really taken up on this initiative, and it's something that we could probably work harder with.
Yeah, and we'll touch on that in terms of how do we shape consumer behavior so that it becomes more circular, because they drive it. But Jenny, let's talk about your efforts in terms of what you think sustainable fashion means.
Okay, well, I didn't set up my business from the point of view of sustainable fashion, but it's something that I've become very quickly interested in and very aware of when you see the amount of waste that goes on. And I think until you're involved in the fashion industry, you probably don't appreciate exactly how much that is. Although recently, of course, there's been a lot more information about it, and we had the shocking, burning of clothes by Burberry, which you can almost feel physically, can't you? I think that's a really... Anyway, hopefully they're going to stop that now. But from my perspective, what I try and do is we produce very high quality fashion. We are the antithesis of quick fashion, fast fashion, however you want to call it. So and we're producing high quality, timeless pieces that are definitely not meant for one season. And in fact, what I've done is we've tried not to have seasons. It's more that we divide the things up into different type of collections that can be used with each other. So to start with, I did just very smart clothes, primarily focused on work clothes, and now I've realised that there's an interest, of course, amongst our customers for other type of clothes as well. But what we've done is so bringing out a weekend wear collection very soon, but we've integrated it with the rest of our existing collection, so people can create that capsule wardrobe. So you're not thinking, oh, I've bought something new, I can't use those trousers. Everything is supposed to integrate with each other. And I think that's really, really important. The other thing in terms of sustainability is that I definitely believe in local manufacturing. And I've taken this to extremes. I mean, I live in Wimbledon, I work from home, everything's around there. But our first manufacturer was in Willesden. That's not that far away. Then we stretched a bit further into Edmonton, which is just a step too far. And now we are in Wimbledon. I have a manufacturer, and I was there to spend half the day there today picking up my collection. It's literally just 5 minutes away. And that is just fantastic. And that also helps in terms of being able to pop in. You can see what the workforce, how the workforce are treated, what it's like, the conditions, and be absolutely happy that is something that you want to be associated with. I would have a horror of using a factory abroad where I couldn't check on it. So for me, the sustainability in our practice is high quality, classic, timeless pieces, local manufacturing, we use recyclable packaging. So I think those are the three main things that we concentrate on.
Fantastic. I think from a legal perspective, in terms of supply chain and the considerations that we need to have when we're thinking about the idea of sustainability, and to me, sustainability and ethical supply chain sort of go hand in hand. What are some of the considerations and some of the things, especially as it relates to people? I know in my area in manufacturing, human trafficking is such a huge issue. But what are some of the things and advice that you see reoccurring issues in that area with regard to sustainability and the touch of people?
It's a really interesting one because in the workplace, there are very clear rules about your statutory obligations as an employer and your obligations towards colleagues. There are clear protections in relation to discrimination or harassment on grounds of any of the protected characteristics, from sex to gender to age. You have those protections and they're very clear. But once you step outside of an employer-employee relationship, things get much less clear and the protection is much harder to grab hold of. So if, for instance, I am working, let's take a fashion industry example. If I'm a model in a fashion show and I'm subject to harassment, I'm really going to struggle to find someone who I can hold responsible for that harassment. Unless the harassment involves an assault, which takes it into the criminal realm, and the implications of that are obvious. It's very, very difficult because the law is designed to require employers to take certain steps to protect their workforce or to bear responsibility for what happens at work. But when it comes to external contractors, the law has become diluted in the last 8 years. So previously it would be if the employer has a contractor on site and the contractor behaves unreasonably towards the member of staff, the employer had a duty in respect of the contractor's behaviour. That's gone. And it's now very difficult for a member of staff. Lots of you may have heard of a case involving, years ago, the comedian Bernard Manning. You had two waitresses who were present at a function, and they were serving tables at this function. Mr. Manning was there as some form of entertainment. He made a number of remarks which offended them and others very deeply, and they struggled to hold their employer liable for his conduct because he was not part of the employer's organisation. He was a third party. So there are real challenges there. I think in terms of best practice, if you are a business which has great values and a strong ethos, you're going to want to see that translate through all of your activities, irrespective of whether you have a statutory obligation to do those things. You know, I'm quite sure that you guys have no statutory obligation to do a heck of a lot of the things you've just outlined, but it's very important. These are values you hold dear. That's your opportunity to shape your culture and to ensure that how you interact with people isn't just driven by what you might be held liable for in law or what you can be sued for, but about the message that you want to distill to the wider population. And at the end of the day, you know, you're reaching out to customers. It's your brand, and your brand is incredibly important. So you're going to do a lot of good things led by a desire to promote the image that you hold dear, and to do the right thing by people and the planet. And that will, I think, result in a change for good.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting because, as I said, my background being in supply chain, we were at one point in time trying to craft a statement that we were going to have suppliers sign up to in terms of human trafficking and anti-human trafficking. And it was one comment that, well, is it too cumbersome? Is it too long? What if they don't want to sign it? I think if they don't want to sign it, that's a bigger problem and a bigger conversation, rather than taking a stand and doing the right thing.
Yeah, I mean, however you decide to approach it, if you are in a position of some buying power, and you are interviewing suppliers to be part of your supply chain, if you're in the position to pick and choose, then you can set as part of your contractual terms that you have certain expectations and they will do certain things or they'll commit to certain practices. That's a great opportunity to use the contract to buy them in, and also to eliminate people who don't share your values and who are not prepared to conduct themselves in a way that you would want to as a business.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to pivot just a little bit. We're talking about people shaping behavior. A little bit of a change, but shaping the behavior of other people, the consumer. And we talked a bit and touched about the circular nature and fast fashion. How do we shift consumer behavior? Because they're the ones that really drive this. So sometimes, there's a conflict between you're not a charity, you're not a non-for-profit organization. You have to have a profit model, you have overhead costs, you have to set a price point. But what we see sometimes is there's only a certain amount that consumers are willing to pay for high quality. There's always that battle that takes place in fashion. How do we shape consumer behavior? What is your experience and what are your thoughts on that?
Sure. Would you like to?
I think it's very hard in terms of price point, because everyone will say, if I tell people we make our clothes in Britain, they say, oh, that's excellent, well done. And then you say how much it costs. It is very difficult. And I have had some comments from customers who think that it's quite expensive, but I've had far more comments from customers who think it's very high quality, they appreciate that it's made here. And I think what you have to do is you have to keep banging the drum. You have to keep telling people about it. There's a fantastic organisation here called Make It British, which I'm sure you know about, and started by a very passionate lady, Kate Hills, who was devastated by seeing the way UK manufacturing was going downhill. It was just reducing. So she set about basically getting a database, signing up lots of manufacturers, putting them in touch with potential customers, and it's grown, and now they're a real force. And together, we're talking about what can you do, I think together we are stronger. So I think organisations like Make It British, which help spread that word about how proud we are, and the quality and the range, and at the end of the day, the product has to be good. The design has to be good. If you're buying fashion, you're not going to buy it just because it's going to help a cause necessarily. It has to tick all those boxes. And that's our responsibility, I think, as the producers. It's difficult, but I would just say keep doing it, really.
I guess I might turn this into a poll around the room. How many of you have really started hearing more about sustainable fashion from the press, from people talking about it just within the last 12 to 18 months? That's great. I think that's already a huge step forward. I think maybe we both came into fashion at the time that this dialogue or this was already starting to brew and really hit the mainstream. But within the time that I have been involved in fashion, it seems like the peers around me, every single new brand that's emerging, has to or is talking about some aspect of sustainability and what's best for the planet and something of a positive impact or social impact with their brand. And I think that's a really refreshing thing to see from these smaller independent brands. From the flip side, you see the huge guys being really scrutinized, Burberry with their burning of the leftover inventory. H&M is always in the news about all of their sort of headlines, something.
Yes.
And I think they are trying, all of these brands are trying to do their best around sustainability, but when a big brand like H&M is talking about it, the media is listening. And a few months ago, we were part of I want to say Sky News, I don't know, BBC, Sky News, but the Environmental Audit Committee launched an investigation into fast fashion, and they were looking, I think it'd be interesting to see what the government findings are as well, because if they're looking at it and the press and the brands all around you are sort of talking about it, it hopefully will start to shape the consumer sort of behavior around it. At the end of the day, I think everyone does love a good deal, and I think that's sort of always the battle. But I think so now when I walk past the Primarks and Zara's and H&M, and if something does, I ask myself, will I wear it at least, 10 times? Is it something that will last? Is it high quality? And then I really make an educated decision before buying a piece of fast fashion.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, because the question I ask myself is, can I wear it 10 times?
Yeah.
I think that's a really big question to ask. It's interesting in terms of the burning of clothes and how, big it made it in the news, but I think that's something that's been going on
Forever.
forever. I don't
Yeah.
think in the fashion industry, I don't think that was a really
It was
big,
open secret.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
It's funny because when we first opened the new affiliate, it was back in 2015, and I won't say what department store allowed us to go into their warehouse of end of use. This was after aftermarket, after employee sales, after the TK Maxx, everything. It was this huge place, and it was high end. Burberry, Alexander McQueen, everything. It was just huge. I was huge. First, after I fainted, and they got me up off the floor because I was in fashion heaven. Oh, everybody's here, But we were allowed to go there for Dress for Success because it was all going to be burned. And so, and this was back in, and so it's not new.
No.
And I won't say, but they do it all the
Yeah.
time. And the only stipulation they had is that we had to cut the name out of the clothing. Because of brand dilution, and they didn't want the value to be, diluted to be on the backs of some of our clients.
Yeah.
To be honest,
Yeah.
and you cringe when you hear things like that. But they do work hard to build an image and a brand. So there's a balancing act of some of the clients that you represent, that they work really hard for the brand and the brand value. But
So I have to ask the brands who are doing that, why did you produce so much in the first place?
yeah, well, yes,
Because they have these growth targets, they have investors and shareholders and all of that. And I think, the corporate culture, capitalism also isn't helping this picture.
yes. And to your point, it's interesting because it triggered in my mind when you talked about how you forecast and forecasting being so important. I'm in a manufacturing setting. We sell door hinges. I will never look at a door the same again because every time I do, I'm like, is that ours? I need to get out more. But we sell door hardware, but one of the largest things that we do, and the hardest part, is forecasting.
Yeah.
And being able to be smart about how it is that you order. And so in the fashion industry, it has such a huge impact because if it's not right, they burn it.
Yeah.
So it's quite interesting in that way. But I guess turning a little bit again and making another pivot, when you have smaller boutique brands versus the large brands, and what I see, I have a friend who's a fashion designer, and I swear on AliExpress, I see his design knocked off like 15 times. I'm like, how does this happen? But in terms of protecting your brand, because then when you have fashion houses and designers who are in the boutique genre, and you have the Zara's and the H&M's, and you have something unique, how do they go about protecting that brand? And I know that's a larger question that you probably charge by the hour. So, give us a summary, the high points, and don't send me an invoice. Yes.
Not tonight. So there are a couple of areas which are ripe for protection. The first is good old-fashioned presence within a retail environment. What happens within that retail environment? We see, sadly, amongst the very high-end retailers, just basic old-fashioned theft. Managers, key holders, who have access to safes and who have access to stores. In the last year, we've seen incidents where close to 100K's worth of beautiful stock has disappeared from the store in the middle of the night, at the same time as the manager, key holder, processing a refund on the point of sale till for £4,000 into their personal account. So being, if people have got access to tills and they've got access to stock, then you need to be careful around that stuff. Those cases are rare because the implications are obvious. Unless you are Houdini who can flee the scene and flee the country, the chances are the law will catch up with you. But we still see a fair smattering of that. Another area which is quite problematic, particularly for iconic brands, is where staff are given discounts or product allowance, and those products find their way onto the grey market. We've had cases where fathers of employees have websites where they are trading in the products at discount, and this kind of thing. So we're lots of our clients will use software in order to capture activity in terms of e-retail, so that they understand if there's suddenly, a heck of a lot of very beautiful candles that are being sold, instead of for £52 at retail, they're being sold for 26 or whatever, because somebody has used or abused their product allowance and just stored the whole thing up. So there's that, and using the contract, of course, to make sure that you set out very clear expectations about what's prohibited and what's permissible. So that's an area for protection. But I guess going towards the sort of the intellectual property side of things, most businesses, as standard, will have a provision in their contract which says that if you work for us and you're a creative person and you're involved in our design process, one, you keep that process totally secret and you don't share at any stage, whether during, after the launch, or indeed after you've gone elsewhere. And we'll also generally be writing in restrictive covenants to make sure that people can't exploit the supply chain, disrupt the supply chain, disrupt the workforce, or use or abuse confidential information. But again, technology has a great part to play in all of this. If you are suspicious as a business that your ideas are being stolen, the starting position is always to set expectations by saying to people in contract and in policy that you will be doing e-monitoring of traffic which goes in and out of their business accounts and sometimes their personal devices. You have strict rules about what they can email home to themselves in terms of confidential information. Keeping an eye on that is very wise. So there are lots of things and little levels of protection that we can build in, usually starting with the contract and supplementing that by having very clear policies on what is acceptable behaviour.
Fantastic. As we see the shift in fashion, I think we are seeing the transformation, the shift in fashion. Anything that you would like to leave for our two designers in terms of a messaging to the consumer?
I wanted to start this brand not just as a for-profit corporation. I had done a lot of seeing profits and money in banking, and that's what I wanted to leave behind. So I hope that our legacy with our values is to create something of value and a solution for the customer, but also as a brand to show the commitment towards sustainability, towards a positive social impact with helping and empowering women. And that's something that even if one day we are a global brand and I'm not sitting here as the founder, CEO, that whoever's still there continues to carry that. And I think to have that longevity in a brand's ethos, it really starts at the very beginning and in the brand's DNA. And that's something that's documented and, every employee is aware of as they make decisions on behalf of the company. So that's my vision.
Fantastic. Jean?
I hope that by promoting sustainability, if we can encourage customers to appreciate quality and workmanship and craftsmanship and support British businesses at this uncertain time, I think would be absolutely fantastic.
Fantastic. Yeah. Well, thank you so much to our panel. Thank you. We're going to take a short 5-minute break. You can go get refreshments and we'll switch